What is going on, everybody, and welcome back to Riff Ram Review here on 88.7 The Choice, your choice for college radio. My name's Ian Nepetian, and tonight I'm joined alongside Zion Trammell and Seth Dowdle. It's episode 8 here. We've been here for 2 months. It's still going strong. It's been an awesome ride. Super fun doing this with you boys. We just got finished, though, talking about TCU's big 44-11 victory over BYU, and now we've got to pivot looking ahead to this weekend's game, the one that everybody really circled on their calendars as saying this is when the season starts, right? I think it was, everyone kind of came in with high hopes saying we might be 6-1, maybe even 7-0, but we're sitting here 4-3, ready to go into Manhattan, Kansas, to face the Kansas State Wildcats, who currently sit in the Big 12. They're tied for third in the Big 12. They're 4-2, 2-1 in the conference, but they are 3-0 at home, and we know better than anyone that Manhattan, Kansas is a tough place to get a win.
I mean, frankly, Kansas State is kind of in a similar spot to us in that this has been a little disappointing start. This is not how they thought their defense of their Big 12 title was going to go. Losses to Missouri and then Oklahoma State? No. Yes. Yeah, they also Oklahoma State. Yeah. So it's going to be cool to see. Manhattan, as you said, is a tough place to play, especially going in at night. K-State fans and TCU, kind of a budding rivalry. I feel like the last 2 games that we played, there was some discourse on the old Bird app that I saw a lot. And TCU, a bitter taste in their mouth coming off that Big 12 championship loss. Yeah,
and just kind of going back to last year, right? TCU in Week 8 of the season beat K-State here at Amon G. Carter Stadium 38-28. That was a pretty convincing victory. And then the two meet up for another date, this time at the Big 12 Championship at AT&T Stadium. And that was a heartbreaking loss. 31-28, K-State won the Big 12 Championship coming down to the wire. That last drive from Max Duggan was one of the most amazing I'm doing this myself drives. But it was a tough loss, but again, this is what makes college football so fun. And Kansas State and TCU is definitely going to be one of those newer rivalries that just continues to get even more enticing.
Yeah, and it's even traveled across the other sports too, with baseball and basketball. It's TCU and Kansas State is heating up. And actually, a fun fact, I wanted to talk about the Big 12 championship game. That is actually where I pretty much met Seth. We went to, yeah, I know. So we had a mutual friend. He picked us up, took us to the game, and that's pretty much where I met Seth. And we met Vince Young that day. That was so random. And we walked back to the car, sharing that feeling of absolute sadness because
it was a long walk too. By the way, we parked very far away.
Parking sucked that day. It was super horrible.
We parked at like a hotel. It felt like it was a mile and a half away.
It really did. And I think and I was silent for pretty much the entire walk back. Like, I don't think I said a word.
You know what stunk even more? We made the dumb decision of going down the slow ramp instead of going down the escalator. So it took us probably like 15 minutes to get from the upper level where we were all the way down to like the base level and to then go outside and it took so long. It was just a really tough that was a tough like half hour from the moment that they get stopped on the goal line to then obviously it's like, well, they're gonna start in field goal range, and then they lost, and then Zion and I got introduced to each other in very solemn fashion.
I was like, well, it's nice meeting you. Like, Kansas State. Oh my God, they should have had that game. Now we don't even know if we're gonna make the playoffs. It's like, this is the worst feeling ever.
I remember on the drive back, we were all like, well, it's fine. It's fine. Yeah. Everything's good. We could still do this.
Yeah. Convincing ourselves.
Yeah, there was a lot.
We're still okay. It doesn't matter. Yeah. Like it's just a trophy. No one cares about it.
I think the line, well, we beat them a couple weeks ago, was uttered probably 10 times.
Too much. Yeah, a little too much.
And I think last year's loss is going to motivate the players a little bit. Brandon Coleman said they kind of have used that as a little bit of a fire because they did prevent them from winning a Big 12 championship. So certainly that is on some of the players from last year. It's probably on their minds, and they want to go in there and get a big dub because I need it, they need it, we all need a big dub here from TCU.
Yeah, and one thing that's kind of interesting about this game in particular is TCU's going to have to prep for two quarterbacks, Will Howard and Avery Johnson. Avery Johnson had a massive game last weekend for the Wildcats, 5 touchdowns in their 38 to 21 victory over Texas Tech. Johnson only passed the ball eight times. He had 9 attempts, but he went 8 for 9 for 79 yards. But the 13 rushes for 90 yards and 5 touchdowns was what's really stood out. I mean, so.
Yeah, that is going to be the main focal point for TCU to win this game, is being able to not fully stop them, but limit Kansas State and their rushing ability. They ran the ball 47 times in last week's game for 288 yards. That's pretty good. That'll get the job done. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how do they prepare differently from Avery Johnson, Will Howard. I'm interested to see, but yeah, I think they're probably going to load the box a little bit more, prepare for the run, and see what they can do from there.
This has kind of been the pain point, and I feel like we've talked about it multiple times, but last season when multiple quarterbacks were in the cards, Texas Tech, and even in that K-State game when Adrian Martinez gets hurt and then all of a sudden they throw in Will Howard and you haven't necessarily been as prepared for Will Howard as you would have been for Adrian Martinez, they struggled at first. I mean, Kansas State got out to a 28-7 lead, or 28-10. What was the lead? It was a substantial lead over TCU in that regular season game in Fort Worth last season. TCU obviously able to mount a comeback and win, as they did multiple times, but that was kind of a pain point. Even Texas Tech had them on the ropes when they were throwing 3 quarterbacks out there. So it's going to be interesting to see how we approach that. We've talked about it multiple times with this kind of multi-quarterback. We talked about with West Virginia. That ended up not really coming to fruition, even though they lost. But it's interesting to see how they handle it, because it is a little bit difficult. Sonny Dykes said it quite nicely. It presents a lot of stuff. You got to look at a lot more stuff, and whatever that stuff is, we don't know. But you got to go in there with a lot more preparation and maybe even some different defensive tactics, depending on who's in, obviously, because they're 2 totally different play styles between Will Howard and Avery Johnson.
Exactly, and just kind of adding to your point, I mean, last year, and this is about Kansas, but when TCU played Kansas, right, Jalen Daniels was in until he got injured, and then Jason Bean comes in, and again, it's that 2 quarterback system that kind of seemed to always nearly get the better of TCU last year. And again, I mean, Sonny said it in the presser, it presents a lot of complexities, lots of different types of complexities, whether it's in the passing game and the running game, tendencies from both of the quarterbacks, and that affects how some of the linebackers play. That, because we were talking about how our linebacking core has been great, but our linebacking core hasn't been phenomenal against quarterbacks that tend to leave the pocket, right? Our linebackers are a little slow, so I'm really curious to see how TCU preps equally or maybe unequally for either of these quarterbacks, Will Howard or Avery Johnson. And also, I'm curious to see how they make in-game adjustments, because I feel like at some point we might see both of them, especially if Will Howard is the one that might start. But I think that's what's tough too, is making those in-game adjustments where, hey, we don't know what's going to be thrown at us at different times. Third downs could be different with both guys. First downs, and I mean, it just like you said, so many more complexities that make it so much more difficult to prep. But I mean, football is a complicated game, and I mean, it is not an easy task to win a college football game.
Yeah, especially on the road. So TCU's got to get off to a quick start. Josh Hoover got to get settled in pretty quickly, man. And I know he did last week, so I expect the same from him. And I'll be curious to see if TCU does trail, how do they respond to adversity? Yeah. Maybe coming out of halftime if they're trailing. What do they do in response to that? That's going to be the big part. So I'm excited for this game. It's really going to be a lot of fun, and I think TCU's got a lot of confidence. They got a much needed win last week against BYU. Offense looked good, so this is going to be a good one.
Yeah, and I'm praying that the offensive line puts in another great shift. I mean, this Kansas State defense hasn't been phenomenal, but they've got 16 sacks on the year, 5 picks. They forced 4 fumbles and recovered 2 of those. So I mean, they definitely show positive spurts on defense, and to know TCU is a bit of a team that lives and dies within that turnover margin, right? I mean, it's definitely kind of daunting to know, hey, K-State is able to force, quite a few takeaways, but kind of now shifting gears, let's kind of put in our score predictions. We know last week we all went 0 for 3. It was an 0 for last Wednesday, but Zion or Seth, either of y'all can start, but score predictions for TCU K-State, what is that kind of looking like in your guys' heads?
This is tough. TCU has not played well in Manhattan the last 2 times. They've lost both of them. Last time was in very horrific fashion, and it was so bad that the administration here at TCU said, we need a new head coach. So, I kind of think the last couple opponents that have given TCU trouble, they've had trouble playing there in the past. Iowa State, Ames is not a fun place to play for Horned Frogs, and neither is Manhattan in recent history. So that is why I am picking the Kansas State Wildcats to win this weekend's football game. Well, let's do another fun score. Let's go 29-26.
Okay. Well, Seth, you made some valid points. I get it. It's tough being on the road. They've not had much success, but the circumstances are different here. I'm a Josh Hoover believer now. I always could believe that he could be good, but I'm on that train. I'm on that hype train. I'm taking TCU to win this football game 35-31. Heard it here first. We are not getting exposed again. TCU will win this one.
All right. I'm confident in Josh Hoover. I'm confident in this TCU football team, but Manhattan, Kansas is a tough place to go. It's not me saying I don't have faith in Josh Hoover, but this is a game that I had down as a loss all season long, whether it was Chandler or it was Josh back there in the pocket. I've got to say I'm going to go Kansas State 34-27. I think it'll be a close game. It's such a hostile territory. So, yeah, 34-27. I'd go with Kansas State. Should be interesting. I mean, it'll be a great game. TCU's going in there with a lot of confidence, and K-State with a little bit more to prove on this season, right, Seth? I mean, you said it earlier. This team came into this season with really, really high expectations, just like TCU. They've under-delivered a little bit, and so both teams have a lot to play for this game. But now kind of changing gears, let's look ahead to a possible bowl game, right? TCU is now 4-3. They're 2 wins away from getting to that magic number of 6 where you are bowl eligible. Let's take a look at their schedule. So coming up, K-State this Saturday. After that, they go on the road on a Thursday night to go play Texas Tech. They come back home for a matchup against the Texas Longhorns, the Baylor Bears, and then they go on the road to finish the season off against Oklahoma. And TCU needs 2 wins out of these next 5 games, and Kansas State, Texas Tech, and Baylor are probably your 3 best bets at circling one. That is probably going to be a win. I'm curious to hear what you guys have to say.
That's absolutely true. I mean, you're not going to be favored in the Texas or Oklahoma games at all, right? Even though the Texas game is at home, you're not going to be favored in the OU game on the road. I'm tempted to just put an L right there already, because it looks like Oklahoma is going to be competing for a Big 12 championship spot and a college football playoff spot at that point in the season, because they already got the Texas game out of the way. So it's kind of almost easy pickings for them. So I think it's going to happen, though. I think they can get to 6, and I think those will come. It's like you said, either going to have to be this week or against Tech or Baylor. And if they do make it, I know this is not something that we were asked to prepare. I hope it is the Pop-Tarts Bowl.
Me too.
TCU,
be awesome.
The Big 12 does get, that is there. It was the Cheez-It Bowl, but we have retired the Cheez-It Bowl now to the Pop-Tarts Bowl.
Since we had 2 Cheez-It Bowls for a real quick second.
Well, we did have the Cheez-It. What was it? And they were both in the same stadium.
Yeah.
It was the Cheez-It was sponsoring a bowl, and then they also had the Cheez-It Bowl.
Yeah.
But TCU was the first team to ever compete in the Cheez-It Bowl.
Yeah.
They played the California Golden Bears, and there were 7-8 combined interceptions between both teams in a 10-7 overtime final.
Unbelievable.
So I think TCU makes it to the Pop-Tarts Bowl. They will play Syracuse, and they will win.
Syracuse.
Okay.
Interesting.
That'd be fun.
Yeah.
TCU Pop-Tart Bowl champions. Kind of a little bit of a
well, interesting
drop off from last year
Well,
from Fiesta Bowl and National Championship to Pop-Tart Bowl.
Is it still not fun though?
I
think
mean,
it's a ton
in
of fun.
Orlando, you get a big Pop-Tart Bowl patch on your jersey.
It's so much
I mean,
fun.
the merch is going to be pretty sick.
Could
Would you rather-
the student body get like a free Pop-Tart? Like all of us get a free Pop-Tart for winning? That would be cool.
TCU hands out free Pop-Tarts for the next year.
Make it happen, Horned Frogs.
Yeah,
make it happen.
Make it happen. But so Seth says we'll make a bowl game.
Yeah.
Ryan, what do you think?
Yeah, so I think we will because I think we're going to win on Saturday. And at that point, you just need one more win for the rest of the season. And I think that comes against Baylor. And I think you finish 6-6, right? Yeah,
Yep.
6-6. That's my prediction. I think TCU can do it. It just, you're going to be underdogs in pretty much most of these games. So one of them, you just got to prevail and come through with a win. So I think they'll be fired up about that. And I think it comes against Kansas State and Baylor.
What's your dream bowl?
What's my dream bowl?
Yeah, mine's the Pop-Tart Bowl.
The Jimmy Kimmel Bowl.
The LA Bowl.
That was the first one that came to my head, honestly. So, yeah, sure.
Ian, I will be asking you the same question, so be prepared.
Oh, with which is my favorite bowl?
Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. Well, now that TCU got the win over BYU, I'm a lot more confident. I'm circling Texas Tech and Baylor as your must wins. I'm praying that there are no hiccups or speed bumps in those games. But with those two games left and TCU sitting at 4 wins, I'm gonna say yes, we will make a bowl game. I mean, as long as God willing, no other injuries come about and the team continues to perform. Josh Hoover stays confident. O-line stays intact. Defense continues to make plays. I mean, this TCU team, I think, should be able to make a bowl game, especially if they get the win over Texas Tech and Baylor. And just like you said, Zion, if they do march into Manhattan this weekend and get that win over Kansas State, that's huge. So, but again, it's a very week-to-week basis thing, right? I mean, this BYU game entering this last week, it was, for me and Seth at least, we were kind of thinking, man, if you lose this is tough, right? Because then you need these 3. But you won that. Now all you need is 2, and there's 2 very, very winnable games sitting right there in Texas Tech and Baylor. But that will wrap up our segment previewing TCU and Kansas State this weekend. That's on Saturday, October 21st, with kickoff slated for 6 p.m. Central Time. That'll be a huge game. And then, again, TCU's road to the bowl game, hopefully down in Orlando. That should be a lot of fun. Up next, in our final segment of the hour, we've got some college football talk. Houston beating West Virginia, Washington taking down Oregon, and then Stanford Cardinals, man, coming back to beat the Colorado Buffaloes. Stay right here on 88.7 The Choice to tune into our college football segment right here on Riff Ram Review on 88.7 The Choice.